I'm back today with another Artist Spotlight video. Today we're going to take a look at the work of the artist known as Darlene, one of my favorite artists from the early era of Dungeons & Dragons. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer, and welcome back to our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Today we're doing an Artist Spotlight series, and we're featuring the work of Darlene, one of my favorite artists from the early era of Dungeons & Dragons. My only complaint about Darlene is I wish we had more of her work. If you stick around to the end, I'm going to show you my top 5 favorite illustrations, and along the way I hope to point out a couple of things you may not know that she did that are important memories from the early days of the hobby. Hope you enjoyed the video. So as I mentioned, we're taking a look at the art of the artist known as Darlene. She did lots of amazing art. The thing I think most people are familiar with in her art is her work in the Dungeon Master's Guide. She had several illustrations in there. She also had several illustrations in the Deities and Demigods, doing most of one of the pantheons. She's responsible for the maps from the world of Greyhawk. And she did a module cover when they redid B1. And she also had some interior illustrations in C1, both the original monochrome as well as the reprint of that. So let's take a look at what she did in the Dungeon Master's Guide. She has this great illustration, "There's no honor among thieves." I always thought the caption made this one particularly memorable, and you'll see that everybody else is dead but this one last guy who's coming in to get the loot. We all know some players like that. This one almost made one of my top 5 favorite illustrations. This is in the back part of the Dungeon Master's Guide where they're talking about magical items, and this I always understood to be a sphere of annihilation. That this guy is moving towards these orcs who are getting ready to flee. And I'd point out for those of you grognards, these are pig-faced orcs, as they should be. She has this really neat little illustration of a guy looking at a gem up in the section that talks about, I think, gem values and the hiring of sages and other hirelings. Back in the magic items section, she's got this really evocative drawing of the guy with his serpent staff here. And then she has a illustration of this reclining mermaid. Here's another one, just really great detail on this owl. His wings always looked a little funky to me, like he's just about to take flight, right? And go get something. And then she's got this succubus looking over her shoulder there, hiding, I guess, her fangs, although the wings kind of give it away, right? Let's take a look at what she did in the Deities and Demigods. She did a lot of work in the Chinese pantheon. She's got a number of illustrations here. These are some really unusual looking deities, and certainly for me at least were a bunch of deities that I was not particularly familiar with at the time. But I thought the illustrations really were very interesting. I remember this guy with the 3 heads. I think his name is Lu Yu. I may not be pronouncing that correctly, but that was always a particularly odd one. I thought you got this guy with the No Cha, who's got the 3 heads put together. Shanhai Qing, who's got the obviously head of a man, body of a bird. This one, Tao Mu, who's got all these arms. And this was my personal favorite. This is Ma Yuan, and I just thought the lizard creature with the extra set of arms looked like an incredibly fearsome opponent. As I mentioned at the beginning, she also was involved in the World of Greyhawk project. This was the original folio, and later there was a box set. But what she did that was so important for anyone who had this, she made this map by hand. And I've seen in a photograph somewhere on the internet a picture of the original maps, and they were giant, like bigger than her, as I recall. And she did all of these, all this work. She talks about putting in the names on there, and she was jokingly saying, like, can you see how large the words are? Well, like when I put those giant words, for example, across the Crystal Misty Mountains, you know, it just took up more space that I didn't have to draw those mountains by hand because it was so much work to do. If you played in the World of Greyhawk, you love this map. It was probably my favorite part or most memorable part of the entire set. And we have Darlene to thank for this incredible map, which really set the standard for any map you ever wanted to draw at home, or any map in any set you would ever get after that point. And here's just a blow up to show you some of the great detail here. And for those of you who have the map or want to get a copy of the map and take a look, if you follow this inlet of the Woolly Bay up here, you'll get to the very famous city of Greyhawk. Let's take a look at what she did for adventure modules. When they redid B1 from the original monochrome, she did both the cover art and the rear cover art for that module, although the interior illustrations remained the same as they were in the prior version of the module. Then in the monochrome, as well as the later reprint of C1, they had this booklet of illustrations. I love those modules that came with the extra booklet of illustrations. And she did a couple of the drawings in there as well. All right, so as I said, my biggest complaint about Darlene is I just wish we had more of her work. I love it. But so let's take a look. These are my top 5 favorites. It's hard to pick. I love so many of her works, but I just picked 5, right? Let's talk about it. So this comes from the Dungeon Master's Guide. It's a full-page piece of art. All kinds of detail of this woodland scene as the adventurers meet this lady. I think she's probably a druid in the woods out by this pond or pool or river. But just great detail in this large illustration. I picked this one from C1 because I just feel like that tree, it looks like it's alive. It looks like it's sad, either lonely or dangerous. And I just found it to be a particularly moving piece of art from her. I mentioned I wanted to make sure there were a couple things you knew she did. One of them were those maps from Greyhawk, which are so important. And the other one is she was the designer of what I call the Wizard in the Moon logo that was on so many of the TSR products that I purchased back when I was a kid. And this is I love all their logos. I think this one is another one of the great ones. This is when they changed their name, right, to be the Game Wizards. This is a particularly famous piece of her art, or maybe familiar. This is the interior cover from the Dungeon Master's Guide. So any of us who had those AD&D books, you open that one up, there was Darlene's unicorn. Just a great illustration, extremely memorable piece of art. Some people probably would have that as their number 1, but this is my number 1. This is from the Dungeon Master's Guide. It's dark, it's stormy. Take a close look at that horse, its face, even its eyes. Like you can see almost sort of fear or startled look to its face, and then you got the rider on there. I just found this one to be a particularly emotionally evocative scene, and that's why I pick it as my number 1 piece of her art. That's it for Darlene and our Artist Spotlight. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had a chance to look at and remember some of her great art. If you didn't know it before, I hope you'll be aware of what a great artist, what a great illustrator she was. As I said, she made an important contribution to the early days of Dungeons and Dragons, and she certainly deserves recognition for all the great work that she did and great memories that she brought to us when we were younger playing the hobby. I try to do videos once or twice a week here on Old School Rules. Got a few more artist spotlights to do, look at different adventure companies and games and products, as well as every Friday I try to put out a Fanzine Friday video to talk about some of these vintage fanzines that I really enjoy, that give you a great glimpse into what the hobby was like back in the 70s and 80s. If you're not subscribed, please, I hope you will. And until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.